While many in the galaxy refer to entering hyperspace as lightspeed or jumping to lightspeed, that's not technically correct. When a ship enters hyperspace, they aren't just traveling extra fast. Hyperspace is an alternate dimension that is accessed when a ship surpasses the speed of light. Normal laws of space-time don't apply in hyperspace. Starships that were capable of achieving this needed a separate engine called a hyperdrive. Hyperdrives made use of supralight hypermatter particles to ensure the ship making the jump wouldn't have changes to their mass and energy. Ship pilots would enter commands into the onboard paralight system. These systems were a combination of mechanical and electro-optical subsystems. These systems would essentially translate the pilot's commands into the necessary reactions through the different components of the hyperdrive. Once the commands were entered, the hyperdrive field guide, a series of metal poles, would channel gamma radiation, the power needed to launch the ship into hyperspace. The hyperdrive motivator, which is the primary thrust initiator, would take this energy and run it through a fusion generator, which was made up of charge planes, effect channels, or superconducting wires. The horizontal boosters provide the energy to the motivator's ionization chamber that would begin the ignition. The ignition releases the radiation through the alluvial dampers. These move servo motors to channel ion particles to control thrust. When all of this funneled, channeled, and redirected energy is finally released, the function causes ripples in the space-time matrix, propelling the ship off these ripples into hyperspace. Along with the hyperdrive, ships were equipped with inertial dampers. The dampers protected the ship, everyone and everything inside of it, from being crushed. A null quantum field generator would activate as a ship entered hyperspace. This prevented the ship from emerging before the desired destination. Specific shields protected the ship from interstellar gas and dark matter, substances the navigation computer may not route around. Beings traveling through hyperspace would use a stasis field to shield the inside of their ship, which prevented aging disparities. To go deeper on time dilation, this theory of special relativity, check out my video on how time works in the Star Wars galaxy. Hyperdrives have a few built-in safeties. A 4-axial stabilizer and hyperdrive regulators stop the physics of hyperspace from turning the ship into scrap metal. The hyperdrive would also maintain the mass and energy profiles of the ship as it crossed into this alternate dimension. During the Clone Wars, Jedi General and war hero Anakin Skywalker was grievously injured. He had to be transported quickly. The pilot attempted and succeeded at a successful hyperspace jump from inside a planet's atmosphere. This was not a common practice and was a risky maneuver. Hyperdrives have inhibitors that only allow a pilot to initiate the jump when free of a set amount of gravitational pull. All ships have sublight engines, much more straightforward to understand engines, that would move the ship within planetary atmospheres and near large celestial bodies. The pilot of Anakin's ship in this specific case worked around the safety measures built into their ship, and in this case, things worked out. The same inhibitors that stop in-atmosphere jumps will also shut down the hyperdrive if a large enough gravity well was detected on the set trajectory. These inhibitors would also keep a ship in hyperspace if the dropping out point was deemed to be too close to a star by the astrogation computers. These failsafes are absolutely crucial to hyperspace travel, exploration, and mapping. With most technology, there is some bad along with the good. Throughout Star Wars history, both in canon and legends, there have been exploits to pull ships out of known paths and lanes. In the High Republic era, the Nihil used a similar tactic to knock ships out of hyperspace. The Galactic Empire created Immobilizer 418 cruisers and Happen mass mines that would create artificial gravity wells, triggering the target ship's safety protocols into kicking in. The earlier days of hyperspace travel and hyperdrives are more heavily in legends and haven't been explored to the same extent in canon. I know I've said it in other transmissions, but I take all content like this to be true until something else comes along to replace it. The first hyperdrive is said to be the Hyperspace Tractor Beam, created by the Celestials in 1 million BBY. This device was massive and required an absurd amount of energy derived from gravity wells. The beam could move smaller ships through hyperspace like a tunnel. More energy meant that larger ships could be moved, but it quickly got out of hand. The next significant enhancement on hyperspace travel came from the Gree civilizations. The Gree are much more modern than the Celestials, but still thousands of years before the Imperial era we know so well. They developed hypergates. Hypergates created hyperspace wormholes and would be set up in a network allowing near instantaneous travel from one gate to another, or through a string of gates. The really interesting thing about hypergates is that it seems that organic beings could simply walk through one and be transported. With all the safety measures starships contain to not age or crush beings using them in ships, I'm not sure this makes any sense. The Gree were gatekeepers with this technology, literally in claiming that only chosen gate masters could activate the gates, and figuratively in their refusal to share or duplicate the technology, so it was eventually lost to time. Jumping forward in galactic history, we get to the Rakata, an alien civilization steeped in the dark side of the Force who were so successful in spreading their culture through war, their civilization was known as the Infinite Empire. They developed something that served the same purpose as a hyperdrive that we've discussed already, but the inner workings were much different. The Rakatan hyperdrive, or Force Drive, was powered by the dark side in the Rakata and could only travel to locations naturally strong in the Force, like Dagobah or Ahch-To. When humans began to take on further interstellar travel, their initial solution was sleeper ships. These ships could not enter hyperspace, but did put organic beings in a stasis sleep so journeys that lasted years, decades, or even beyond their natural lifespan could be taken. This wasn't so convenient as it made most trips one way, and the whole galaxy could be different by the time they arrived. This also didn't protect the travelers from the perils of long-range space travel. Their first venture into hyperspace came from hyperspace cannons. These cannons could launch ships from the core worlds deeper into space. Technology aboard the ship could slow the travel to real space where sublight engines would take over. This made exploring much faster, but again, it resulted in one-way trips, and it did little to protect the travelers. It wasn't until approximately 25,000 BBY, 2 centuries after the fall of the Rakata Empire, that the Force drives were reverse engineered to work without the dark side of the Force. Engineers on Corellia and Duro were in a race to create the first modern hyperdrive. It's unclear who was actually first, but with 2 options of hyperdrives, the figurative arms race advanced the technology exponentially. A mere 2 decades later, ships jumping to hyperspace, as we now understand it, was common practice. The first hyperdrives, even the commonly used ones, were faulty, slow, and unreliable. As the technology improved, the hyperdrives got smaller and improved all around. The Corellians and Duro sold the hyperdrives to other shipbuilders. The Alderaan Royal Engineers, Core Galaxy Systems, Corellian Engineering Corporation, and Rendili Star Drive all started mass production of ships of various sizes. The galaxy's expansionist era was underway. Colonization in the wider galaxy thrived, and the earliest days of the Galactic Republic arrived. The core worlds of Coruscant, Alderaan, Corellia, Chandrila, and Duro were the first joined worlds. Hyperspace prospectors would venture out to discover trade routes. This type of exploration was incredibly dangerous, but if a route was discovered, they could hold rights and profit greatly. With the galaxy being bigger than ever for its inhabitants, the Republic established a Space Lane Bureau to chart and map everything. Coruscant became the navigational center of civilization with the coordinates 000. The Bureau aimed to put an end to private holdings of hyperspace lanes. They began to set up standards for travel, trade, and exploration, which birthed a galactic economy. In time, things like the jump gates and hyperspace beacons became obsolete. Onboard nav computers were so sophisticated with constant information updates that as long as a pilot could pilot their end coordinates, the technology could route through hyperspace and get them there safely. For all the civilization advancements and unity under a single republic, there were almost as many wars. Small scale between planets and systems, or large scale like the Great Hyperspace War. Even with all the advancements in hyperdrive technology, the drives were too big for most smaller ships, such as starfighters, until the near end of the Republic era. Hyperdrive rings or sleds allowed these ships to utilize light speed until engines were made small enough to fit inside the starfighter. Entering hyperspace, or jumping, created a simutunnel, which is essentially a pocket of real space that allowed space travel through the alternate dimension. As I said, hyperspace didn't just allow a ship to physically move extra fast, but it would literally shorten the distance of the given journey. Each point in real space has a corresponding point in hyperspace. This is also true for large objects in real space, such as stars, planets, and asteroids. Their corresponding objects were known as mass shadows. A ship's navicomputer would precisely calculate coordinates to avoid flying into or through these objects, which would obviously be disastrous. Companies and brave pioneers mapped hyperspace lanes between popular areas that others could use safely. Some Force-sensitive beings could serve as navigators when routes weren't available, like in the unknown regions of space. Quick jumps in hyperspace, or hyperspace skipping, could be dangerous. It was hard on the ships and unsettling for the living beings aboard. Hyperspace whiplash was a concern for these types of jumps. With how difficult it was for human and humanoid species to harness hyperspace travel, there is a semi-sentient species called Purrgil that could actually make this jump totally unassisted. Purrgil are generally about the size of a standard starship, though some have been classified as Purrgil Ultra and can be significantly larger. These massive creatures exist in the vacuum of space and enter the simultunnels of hyperspace. They traveled in colonies that could be dozens of these unique creatures. Purrgil were likely the inspiration for early civilizations attempting hyperspace travel in the first place. Over the course of time, as hyperspace travel became second nature, spacers forgot about these creatures' unintentional contribution to civilization, and they were seen as pests. The Purrgil could get in a ship's path in hyperspace, which was very dangerous. There are some notable events involving various aspects of hyperspace. During the High Republic era that spans roughly 500 to 100 BBY, hyperspace was used, but the understanding of exactly how it worked was largely unknown or misunderstood. A lot of it remained a mystery even up into the reign of the Galactic Empire. The Nihil, a roaming band of marauders during the High Republic, terrorized the galaxy. They were able to navigate unique hyperspace routes they called paths. The paths seemed impossible to everyone else in the galaxy. Using these paths, the Nihil destroyed a freighter, the Legacy Run, while in hyperspace. This shocked the galaxy because they had never considered this could even happen. And even worse, the debris caused a destructive chain reaction. Shrapnel of various sizes would exit hyperspace at different times and in different places, sending destruction throughout the galaxy. This is the earliest version I could find of hyperspace being weaponized. The Galactic Republic even shut down hyperspace travel for a time while they investigated the terrorist attack, essentially freezing the galaxy in place. Han Solo built a reputation on being a great pilot. A lot of this was due to his ship, the Millennium Falcon. Some of the Falcon's speed was due to Han's gutsy piloting, and some was due to the Navicomputer and hyperdrive. After Solo's death, the Falcon was used regularly in the war against the First Order. Ace pilot Poe Dameron used hyperspace skipping to flee the First Order. The Falcon held up, but it didn't get out completely unscathed. The ship needed major repairs. The First Order built on the technology of the Death Star and hollowed out the planet Ilum. They built a massive weapon inside the planet that had the power to destroy an entire solar system. The weapon would rip a hole in sub-hyperspace when fired. This required a tremendous amount of power. The weapon would literally absorb a star. The rip in sub-hyperspace meant the light caused from the weapon and resulting damage could be seen widely across the galaxy. After the destruction of most of the New Republic's government, the Resistance was on its last leg. They were being pursued by the First Order, who had developed the ability to track a ship through hyperspace. Vice Admiral Emmeline Haldo used the hyperdrive of her capital ship to actually find the mass shadows of the pursuing ships and jumped her ship through them, sacrificing herself to strike a blow to the First Order and allow the Resistance to escape. This was a difficult maneuver and posed a great risk. Much like the Nihil attack we just went over, this could have led to shrapnel making a mess in hyperspace lanes. This also required Haldo to override the navigation computer and any safety parameters about plotting hyperspace jumps, which is why a living being needed to stay on board. To be transparent, some of my information on how and why of the Haldo maneuver are my own theories, but I feel they're logically sound. I've been a Star Wars fan for decades, before I even considered what jumping to hyperspace meant. I always thought it was a ship being accelerated at or just above the speed of light, and the ship's computers made sure you didn't crash into anything. It wasn't until the High Republic with the Great Hyperspace Disaster that I needed to know more. When I started looking into it for this transmission, it went so much deeper than I ever imagined. I had a ton of fun going this deep on the subject. Check out this transmission next to go even deeper into the Star Wars galaxy.